So I chose to write about Eve Bunting. My name is Kelly Christensen, and I hope you enjoy this presentation. So why I chose to write about Eve Bunting. The first aspect that drew me to her was honestly the first picture that popped up of her was the one that I put on this first slide, and she looks super sweet and just like pure and kind of reminded me of my grandma, and I was like, oh my gosh, I want to write about her. Like, she looks so nice. I also thought it was great that she immigrated to the United States because some of her picture books have that storyline, and since learning about multiculturalism in this class, I realized that I need more books that are different about different cultures and pursue different life lessons just because it's super important. And yeah, I just think I need to be able to articulate that to my students and educate them well on that. And so I thought it was really cool that she immigrated. She writes fiction and nonfiction, and she's written about over 100 books, and she's gotten several medals. And so I just thought that was really awesome and really cool to be able to tell my students about that. And lastly, her first published book was The Two Giants, a folktale that she had learned about in her childhood. And when someone had said, why did you write this book? She said that I thought everyone in the world knew this book, and when I found out they didn't, well, I thought they should. And I thought that just really shows how much she finds her writing important and the things she writes about is important. Another thing that drew me to Eve Bunting is the fact that she's not afraid to write about tough subjects. For example, racial prejudices, death, troubled families, and war. And although she is writing about those subjects, she includes happiness and joy and hope and fills her books with those. Two examples are Fly Away Home, which illustrates a homeless father and son, and then also Smoky Night, which is a story of racism and the Los Angeles riots with colorful illustrations. And I'll talk more about them in a few minutes as well. So a little bit more about her writing style and illustrations. So she always adds diversity within her topics and also just in her characters, which I thought was really, really important. So whether the topics are diverse and that they're about tough subjects, she adds diversity in that way. And then her characters and her stories are also diverse. So different skin tones, one-parent households, they don't always have amazing home lives, like Fly Away Home. And so I thought that was really cool just because I think it's important to educate our students on as many things as possible and teach them life lessons rather than just teaching about sweet little stories. She uses warm colors for illustrations for hard topics like racial justice or homelessness. And she writes in different categories like short story, picture books, chapter books, and young adults, which I find is really important because she can get to different types of people, so not just young adults or not just children. She correlates to both. And she doesn't have one particular illustrator she likes. It really depends on what type of book she's writing, and then she chooses the illustrator, which I thought was really cool because that's not super normal, and she doesn't have the same illustrator every single time, so her books are have a different range of illustrations in them, just depending on which illustrator she chose at that time. And so Fly Away Home is going to have different illustrations than Smoky Night, for instance. So I read 5 books from her. The first one was Fly Away Home. It's very emotional, and it's about a hard topic, but I think it's awesome to have this representation for younger kids and to articulate it to them. It's about a young boy who lives in an airport with his father because they're homeless, and they move from terminal to terminal so that no one notices that they're staying overnight multiple times a week. And one day, a bird comes in and it becomes trapped inside, and the little boy notices it. And I think it's funny because I'm sure no one else noticed because they're running around to their different gates and terminals. And then one day it gets out, and it gives them both hope that they too will get freedom from this livelihood that they're living. It touches on homelessness, relationships with families, mostly the one with his father, and shows students that there are people struggling and going through things that maybe they're not used to seeing. And it also touches on hope, freedom, building relationships, and being kind to others, which I think is a super important aspect to teach our students, and it's a really good lesson. And so I think it's awesome. The second one was Smoky Night, and its illustrations are done by David Diaz. It actually won a Caldecott medal, and this book is a story of a young boy named Daniel that is witnessing the aftermaths of the Los Angeles riots. And so two neighbors that don't really like each other have to work together in order to find their cats during all of the looting, and while searching for them, they have to learn to get along. And so this story was intended to teach students about the Rodney King events and also show like that an unlikely pair could work together for good, which I think is an important life lesson to teach our students in being kind to one another. And it made the list of 100 books that shaped the century at the school staff library. So this one's just really great because it won medals and teaches a really good life lesson. So Flower Garden. This one's really sweet and it's very simple, pure, and honestly could be a really great book. Like I see myself reading it in the spring, maybe when I'm talking about seedlings and gardening in my classroom. And it tells a story of a young girl and her father, and they go and buy plants and potting soils and a window box, and then they take it home and build it for the mother. The illustrations are colorful and warm, and it just depicts the story of a loving family and a sweet family, and it really made me smile and made me happy. And I also love that she always adds diversity to her books, so her characters are not always Caucasian, and I think that's really important so that our students feel seen and that like they're being that they are seeing other cultures rather than just like white kids. So Dandelions was also a really good one. It touched on topics that students can relate to, which is moving. So it's about a family that moves from Great Plains of Nebraska, or they come from Chicago to the Great Plains of Nebraska, in a covered wagon, and they start a new life. And their home is in the middle of nowhere, and Zoe is the main character, and she sees her mom being kind of sad that they moved there, but her father being happy. And so you get to see like those differencing in emotions, but also like talk to them about moving and just like how the language is different used in the story because it's more of like a Western, like Little House on the Prairie. And so I loved it because the story goes through a hard topic, but then that they can relate to, but it's based in a time that they need to use their imaginations in order to like picture. And so I thought that was really, really cool. So lastly, this was my absolute favorite book that I read from her. It's called A Day's Work. So it's great for ELL students or regular students, learners as well. It's a story of a boy named Francisco and his grandfather, they call him Abuelo, who just arrived from Mexico, and he's trying to find him work. And so his grandfather doesn't speak any English, and it's based in San Francisco, and he's trying to get him as a job as a gardener, but his grandfather is a carpenter, not a gardener. And so he has no experience, and Francisco tells like a little white lie to this employer that his grandfather can garden. And then they get into a pinch because the employer comes back and he's angry when he sees that Francisco and his grandfather have pulled out all the flowers and only left weeds in his lawn. And so they're having to deal with like the fact that he lied. And so I think, first of all, it's really great that this book uses Spanish words as well in it, just because you're bound to have an ELL student in your class. And then it also goes on that Abuelo is angry at Francisco, but also like keeps himself calm and cool and tells Francisco that he has to come back tomorrow and fix the work. And so Francisco's upset because he can't like do fun things on the weekend. And so it teaches our students like a little bit about immigration, family values, but then also teaches really good life lessons like honesty, hard work, family values, making our wrongs right, and bringing awareness to different family cultures. And I guarantee that we will have those family cultures in our class. And so that's why it was definitely like one of my favorites, and definitely a book that I want to seek out and try to have in my own classroom one day, just because I think that it had really good life lessons, and the illustrations were really great as well. And I just thought the relationship was really sweet between Francisco and his grandfather as well. So, some personal opinions. I found that Eve Bunting uses a lot of her own qualities in her writing when she's creating stories, which I thought was like really, really cool because she's kind and pure and smart, but also an immigrant. And so she cares a lot about social justice and wants our children to know about them too, not just the adults. And so she wants to educate them by using characters that teach lessons, whether they're big lessons or small. She uses diversity when creating her characters, which I thought is really awesome. And so you don't see a lot of white characters, a majority of them or Hispanic or Black. And so I just thought that that was really awesome. And also, she teaches values that she finds important and like ones that she learned when she was growing up, which I just thought was like really cool because not a lot of writers do that. And so I found that she was very pure and empathetic, and I really liked that about her. So I'm going to be talking about my web sources. So I had three of them. The first one is actually a source I used. It's like a reference of mine, but I found it was super helpful in learning about my author. The second one is a really cool interview of Eve that I think you guys should check out. And then the third one is my favorite. It's really awesome because it's a guide in order to use her books in your classroom. So you can click on the little pictures and it will give you lesson plans for to use in her classroom, like if you want to use a certain book. But yeah, thank you guys so much for watching, and here are my references.